Do I look okay? How's my face? Do you think I look old? I look older than your mother, don't I? How about this sweater? Does this make me look fat? Toastmasters, for 2 years, my coworker would greet me that way every time she entered the office. And I would just always wonder, what is going on with you? What's wrong? I could see the insecurities in her, but I was always too scared to ask her what the problem was because I felt like I would offend her. But eventually she started sharing stories with me of why she was so insecure. She talked about her sisters a lot and how they were tall and thin, and one had a short pixie cut and looked like the actress Jamie Lee Curtis. And the other one was equally as beautiful, except she had long blonde hair, and how she was just the short, fat one of the family. And then she told me a story about the day her mother looked at her and she said to her, "My poor daughter, you're the one who didn't get the pretty face." Oh. And I thought, wow, who would say something so hurtful to their own daughter? It was at that point where I started to understand how the devastation and rejection can burden someone's heart for years and years, if not for their entire life. And my coworker, she's already in her mid-50s, but she's still burdened by something that happened to her as a small child. For me, I had the opposite effect, because my grandmother always talked to me about being beautiful. And as a child, I didn't quite understand why she was always talking about it. But as an adult, her message is very clear to me. She wanted me to identify and love my own beauty, because it's something that a lot of women have a hard time coming to terms with. And a couple of weeks ago, I saw a commercial presented by Dove, where they did an experiment, where they went to different countries around the world, and in front of the storefront, they put in the door, it said beautiful, and the other door said average. And they watched to see which door the women would enter. And they were shocked to see that 96% of the women decided to walk through the door that said average, instead of the door that said beautiful. And they said, in reaction to their experiment, women make thousands of choices each day related to their careers, their families, and let's not forget themselves. Feeling beautiful is one of those choices that women should feel empowered to make for themselves every day. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like that is the case. And what I've begun to notice is that identifying yourself as beautiful is really a problem for women worldwide. As I've been fortunate to do some traveling, I've noticed that everywhere I go, there are some issues surrounding beauty, no matter what country you're in. For example, I remember being in Thailand and I wanted to buy some soap to bring back to other people because it had so many exotic scents that you can't necessarily find back here in America. But the problem was every soap on the shelf had some type of whitening agent in it. And I thought, I'm not interested in bleaching my skin. But in Thailand, the women are made to feel that being lighter or as white as possible is the better way to look. Then I remember teaching in South Korea, and my students would look at me and they would say, "Teacher, I have an eyelid like you. Can you tell? Can you see? Can you see?" And I would think, well, I kind of see like some skin has been pushed down, but it doesn't look like an eyelid. And then I would ask them, why would you get that surgery when the majority of the people in your country have a different feature? And they would just simply say, because eyelids are better. And then I think of going to Brazil, where I would say it's the land of the beautiful people. Everyone in Brazil looks great. But maybe because they're so consumed with plastic surgery. Rather, they're getting breast implants, tummy tucks, or the popular Brazilian butt lift. And then there's France. I remember being in Paris and seeing how consumed the women were with being slim. It took me over a week to just find one woman that was over the size 4. some of these things are also very common in the United States as well, where women definitely will try to find or identify themselves as beautiful. And there's certainly a lot of emphasis placed on beauty within our country. Perhaps you're supposed to be tall and thin and look like a supermodel, but it's not really realistic for us all to look like supermodels. But oddly enough, that's who my grandmother used to influence me and to help me identify myself as beautiful. She used one supermodel, Naomi Campbell. Every time she found this picture, a picture of Naomi Campbell, she would mail it to me or she would save it to me. And then when she saw me, she would say, "Don't you think she's pretty? Isn't she beautiful? I think she looks just like you. Isn't she gorgeous? I just can't get over how much you look like her." And I would think, "Granny, I do not look like that lady. Why do you keep telling me I look like Naomi Campbell?" Well, at first I thought maybe she was telling me to be a model. So I tried it at 12 years old. I remember having a contract with this Bree, and my parents taking me to San Francisco, and I was trying the clothes, and it was a lot of fun. But then one day they told my dad, "You know, she's just too short and she's not quite skinny enough." So that ended my modeling career. So I figured maybe my grandmother was telling me something else. But it wasn't until she told me her stories of identifying herself as beautiful that I understood what she was trying to say. She grew up in St. Louis, the youngest of two sisters. And her older sister was a very fair skin and had long, sandy brown hair. And my grandmother was darker skinned and didn't have quite as long as hair as her sister. She said growing up, people always told her she was ugly, that she was adopted. There certainly was no way that they could be sisters, because look how pretty your sister is and look at you. And she said the breaking point for her came when she was 19 years old. She went to a house party with her sister. And when the party host opened the door, she brought out one of these, a paper bag. And they did what they called back then a paper bag test, which means if you're lighter than the paper bag, you're all right. If you're not, then you're considered unattractive. My great aunt was clearly much lighter than the paper bag, and so she was allowed inside the party. My grandmother was clearly darker than the paper bag, and she was not allowed in the party. So her sister went into the party and left her standing outside by herself. She said that was the final straw for her, that she was no longer going to let the devastation and rejection burden her anymore. So she decided to pick herself up and she moved to California. And in California, she worked as a model, became a registered nurse, an entrepreneur, and finally ended her career teaching nursing. So it became more clear to me that she wanted me to not let my outer appearance affect the way I felt about myself. And one of the messages that my grandmother left with me is reflected in this quote by Maya Angelou. "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." It was the way that my grandmother responded to the rejection and devastation of her childhood and redirected that energy to flourish in her life, that she was able to instill the same images in my life as well. In her book, Natasha has illustrated how her friend was able to move on past the moments of despair, desperation, and rejection following the events of Hurricane Katrina. Even though my grandmother's experiences may be greatly different from hers, they may have experienced the same emotions. And from those emotions, they were able to move on and define themselves within their new lives. And the idea that being beautiful is not an outer appearance, but who you become in life. And I end with this quote by Elizabeth Ross. "The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These people have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen.